Hello everyone, you're watching NDTV. Look at these headlines, ladies and gentlemen. I'm asking the producer to put those visuals on our television screens. It's a grateful nation bidding adieu to India's 14th Prime Minister. Dr. Manmohan Singh, a stalwart of Indian politics and economics, has left an indelible mark on nation's history. Sometimes in the past, Dr. Manmohan Singh had famously said he was not only an accidental Prime Minister, but also an accidental Finance Minister. But today, he is being remembered as India's great liberaliser, a monumental Prime Minister. His contributions to politics, humility and integrity earned him respect across party lines. Despite facing criticism during his tenure, he remained committed to his vision for India. And in his final press conference, Dr. Manmohan Singh had famously said, history will be kinder to him than the contemporary media or even the opposition parties in parliament. These words have proven prophetic, as history today is indeed being kinder to him, acknowledging his monumental contributions to India's progress. It's in the strength of these tributes that a man's legacy is being judged. And that's how Dr. Manmohan Singh will be remembered. Today, across party lines, leaders are sharing their views, their memories, their moments with Dr. Manmohan Singh. Over the next 1 hour, I'll be getting you several leaders across party lines, from the Congress to the BJP, and many of them who have worked very closely with Dr. Singh. First up, let's listen in to what Dr. Hardip Puri, Union Minister and also a former diplomat, had to say about Dr. Singh. Tributes are pouring in from left, right and center for the demise of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Someone who worked with him is joining us live, Hardip Singh Puri, Union Minister. Sir, thank you for speaking to NDTV. You were an IFS officer, a diplomat when Dr. Manmohan Singh was there at the center of his power. As someone who worked with him, what are your memories of Dr. Manmohan Singh, particularly that he was seen as someone who staked it all for the civil nuclear deal with the US?
Thank you very much, Maria ji. In recalling the contribution of the late Dr. Manmohan Singh, I think what needs to be stressed is that behind his quiet demeanor was a very strong resolve. He came through as being very soft-spoken, and he also, I think, chose to express himself in soft terms. But when he had taken a decision after having convinced himself, I think he did not spare any effort in terms of resolute implementation. You mentioned the US-India civilian nuclear deal, and I think that is a case in point to illustrate this quality of his. I was then ambassador to the UN in Geneva. He stopped in Geneva overnight on his way back from the United States. It was clear almost from the minute the final phase of negotiations began that the deal would come in for a lot of criticism, both within the Congress party and from the left of center parties and indeed other political parties. But I think Dr. Singh was convinced that India's economic growth trajectory would require abundance of energy, and he was convinced that nuclear energy provided a possible solution to the energy problems of India. So when the opposition grew in momentum, he did not flinch. He chose to become even more determined, to the point that was reached that he was even willing to forsake the future of his government on that. And I think that strategy worked, and at the end the India-US bilateral civil nuclear energy deal went through. We also got an India-specific safeguard agreement from the IAEA. We also got something from the Australia Club on chemicals. So I think that sums up the personality. Normally, in the political world, which I am part of, it is very easy for us to take positions determining based on which side of the political spectrum. Was he your leader or anybody? But I think that's a short-sighted approach. What may have happened in the past, what is important now is that the economic reforms that he set in motion, first as finance minister, then as prime minister, they laid the foundation for the substantive work which was done post 2014 to take the economy to the growth trajectory in which we are today. Equally, India-US civilian nuclear energy deal laid the foundations in a strong way for a bipartisan political, economic, people-to-people relationship between the two world's largest democracies. And I think if we are able today to look at the relations with the United States in a manner which is free from the baggage and the prism of the Cold War, I think Dr. Manmohan Singh's contribution in that will have to be recalled with a great degree of admiration.
And Mr. Puri, his manners were often understated, mild-mannered Sardar, as he was often called, with a great degree of quiet humility. He was also the first Prime Minister from the minority community, the Sikh community. As someone who comes from the same community, what do you think his role has been and the contribution to politics and the direction of policy of India?
Well, Mariaji, I will take you up on your words. When you describe Dr. Manmohan Singh as a mild-mannered personality, I think that mild mannerism is true. It's a characteristic. But behind that mild mannerism was also a very astute mind. He was an outstanding economist, a cerebral person, a deep thinker. And I think people make simplistic characterization that he was more an academic, more a civil servant, and less of an astute politician. I don't agree with that. I think the very fact that he moved seamlessly from a life in academia into very high-powered, high-voltage positions in the civil service. I mean, he was secretary in the Ministry of Finance, he was governor of the Reserve Bank, finance minister, and all those responsibilities he shouldered, being acutely conscious of the political realities around him. I mean, you could fault his style by saying, well, sometimes when he faced adversity, maybe he didn't speak up. But that was his choice. If he wanted to get something done, he perhaps realized that his style of navigating forward was better when he could get a consensus. So I must say that history will record him with great degree of admiration. And I think his contribution, as far as his being a member of a minority community, the Sikh community, I think he was a very proud Sikh himself. He studied in a Khalsa school, he went to Punjab University, got his matriculation, and then went to the United Kingdom to first the University of Cambridge, where he got a tripos in the first class honours, and then to get a DPhil from Oxford. I mean, and he was a devout Sikh all along. And I think the community not only respected him, the Sikhs still respect him, and he was, in all respects, he brought a great dignity to the office, and he was identified, and all like, sober, well-meaning people, whether Sikhs or others, identify with this kind of mature approach.
Mr. Puri, he certainly would be seen as an ultimate outsider who made to the top of the political office. A technocrat, who went on to be the Prime Minister of India. First time it has happened in Indian political history. How do you look at this transition? And as someone who's also a diplomat yourself.
Well,
a former diplomat.
Well, Mariaji, I would, I have some difficulty with these characterizations of outsider and insider. I'm not sure. I think what you are perhaps implying is that Dr. Manmohan Singh did not deliberately thrust himself or seek office. Yes, I would agree with that. But that is also the sign of a very mature statesman. Sometimes we tend to forget that individuals make history. I'm using a Marxian conceptology. Individuals don't make history in circumstances of their own choosing. The circumstances so produce. I mean, you had a situation in the Congress party, you had the late Shri Rajiv Gandhi, then you had Shri P.V. Narasimha Rao, you had other leaders, you had some other tall leaders like Shri Pranab Mukherjee. But at that point of time, the fact that he was chosen in preference to some others who had served the Congress party with great distinction as well, to be the Prime Minister, I think speaks volumes for how he positioned himself. And I would say that he never sought office, but it was a sheer, by dint of merit, the fact that he was chosen as first economic advisor in the Ministry of Trade, then chief economic advisor in the finance ministry, then as he went to the international arena, he was director of the money and finance division of UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, after that he was a well-paid international civil servant. He left that and he came back to India. Then again, when he was heading the South Commission along with Malimu Nairere, Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Secretary General. He chose to leave that to come back to India when his services were called. So he always answered that. So I think he's a very positive human being, understated, yes, as by contemporary standards of that time. Each age produces its own. There were more people with higher decibel levels around at that point. But his contribution is what will be recorded in history, and I think his services will be recalled with great admiration and affection.
And Mr. Puri, of course you spoke elaborately about the civil nuclear deal, but in the last 10 years, I mean, in his tenure as the Prime Minister from 2004 to 2014, he was also seen as giving direction to India's foreign policy, something that you see in terms of the tributes which are pouring in from across the world. World leaders have great things to talk about Dr. Manmohan Singh and their personal equations with him. Barack Obama has tweeted about the Titan who's clearly put India on fast track. So when you look at his overall policy, foreign policy contribution, of course, he is talked about as an economist whose brilliance, of course, was known by all, but as someone who shaped India's foreign policy besides the civil nuclear deal.
Well, I think the contribution of a Prime Minister between 2004 and 14 should not be measured just in terms of the India-US civilian nuclear deal, because the deal in itself has not resulted in any commercial exploitation. I think the importance of the civilian nuclear deal lies in the fact that it was anchored in and produced a qualitative transformation and positive orientation to the India-US bilateral relationship. But apart from that, I think the fact that Dr. Manmohan Singh's efforts in terms of the Look East policies provided the basis on which the present Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji, has developed an Act East policy, but also in other areas. I was ambassador to Brazil when he visited Brazil for the first time. This was the year 2006. And that was the beginnings of the friendship with President Lula. And India joined IBAS or IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa, a 3 democracies partnership. We became a member of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, which other countries like South Africa and others were added later. During the course of those 10 years, the interactions he had with different heads of state and government, the positive chemistry of that is now being reflected and it's pouring in. I just saw a tribute from the Malaysian Prime Minister, said that in his hour of darkness, he showed and extended kindness, which was not to be expected, what he was not expecting. But similarly, whether you are naming President Obama or the tributes which are coming in from other world leaders, these speak to the human qualities. And I think at this point of time, as the country mourns his loss, that is the sentiment on which I think we should remember the departed leader.
All right, Mr. Puri, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on what is clearly a lasting legacy of the former Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. And joining me now is Abhishek Manu Singhvi, a senior Congress leader and also a Congress member of Parliament. Dr. Singh, we appreciate your time. Manmohan Singh himself said that democracy is not just a form of government, it is an article of faith for our people. You worked closely with Dr. Manmohan Singh. Did you find him democratic in his functioning and approach?
Innately so, inherently so. His very nature, his very character, his persona was so inclusive, so gentle, so soft that he could not but be democratic. He was genetically democratic, I think. And though he never made, glamour, form, sensationalism, ostentation, drama, etc., his calling cards, fakeness, hypocrisy, empty rhetoric, he worked with a quiet solidity to build consensus on every issue. So as far as your democracy question is concerned, he would start any issue by consultation, by getting his viewpoints. But then, once he was convinced of a particular view, you'd be surprised at his inner tensile strength. Inner tensile strength was great. He was no walkover, he was no pushover. His ask list and his ambition list was not high. But when he chose his points and he wanted to do them, he would stand firm. And time and again, I have believed that other entities, including the party, has given in much more to his choices than the other way around, a commonly misconceived notion.
And Dr. Singhvi, one, of course, because the act, or should I say, how the era of coalition politics was he compromising? Because it was about coalition dharma. Did you find him, be more accommodative, or was Dr. Manmohan Singh compromising to ensure that the coalition government was functioning?
Well, obviously, you see, coalition by definition, another synonym for it would be compromise. Otherwise, why would anybody like to give up unilateral power and coalesce with you? So obviously, in a democracy, numbers matter. Obviously, majorities made up in coalitions have to be consensual. So this is painted as some kind of but he did that coalition compromising with great dignity. There was nothing cheap about him. There was nothing gross about it. And when push comes to shove, he himself, A, could not be party to any illegality. B, when push comes to shove, as far as his principles were concerned, he would stand firm. But in many issues, of course, he did give in. For example, take an example of appointing a particular minister. I may not want to appoint you, but if your coalition partner insists, contrary to your own perception, that is my perception of you, I may still have to appoint you. So in those things, there were compromises. But let me tell you that when he thought that policy A and B had to be done, and if A and B had to go through a ministry which was headed by a coalition partner, he would not give up if he felt that it was necessary. Within that ambit of list, yes, he would allow a lot of latitude, which is but natural in a coalition situation.
Manmohan Singh's long career was not just about him being a politician, it was about a technocrat. Of course, what followed was a finance minister and also the prime minister. He has had an illustrious career. As a politician yourself and also a Congress leader, what do you think would be and is the most defining milestone of his legacy?
Well, firstly, I would call him a one-trick wonder. It restores your faith in politics to find that a man with such simplicity can succeed in Indian politics. A man with such incorruptibility can succeed in Indian politics. A man with such humility can succeed in Indian politics. It restores your faith because that word politics in India has become highly debased and devalued and degraded. He, by nature, practiced these virtues. They came to him naturally. And I get to see a person who could be more simple and humble. He would telephone back to say thank you. Anybody who came of any rank, whether he was a prime minister or not, he would get up and greet them and meet them. As I said, he micromanaged the 1-2-3 debate. He made sure that I opened both the speeches by cutting across various party entanglements in between. He sent the rising star of the Foreign Office, Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon, to brief me. He wrote 2 forewords to my book after first finding his office objecting to sitting prime ministers writing forewords. But then he found there was sufficient leeway in the rule to do it. He did it. He was very rule-bound, but equally not pedantic about it. I remember how he kept the faith with Narasimha Rao, to whom he was very close till the end of his days. He visited him. On his death anniversaries, etc., he would go to him. He had a great human touch. He knew my father well. So when he died on his Shraddhanjali Sabha, he changed a lot of programs to come personally. He would go out of the way to look at talent, to choose talent. And he was not insecure in that. Yes, he was unelectable. He always said so, and he realized that. But then he also said that if I want to do what I think is good for the country, I think I have to make compromise and I have to build consensus. It's no point saying that you made a compromise to do something, because otherwise you could not do it at all. There's no point lamenting and not being able to do what you want.
Dr. Singhvi, Dr. Manmohan Singh's tenure as the Prime Minister, those 10 years, particularly UPA 2, was very, very challenging given the nature of allegations his government faced. And of course, his ministerial colleagues had to resign because of the allegations, but he remained completely unimpeachable.
Well, I don't think even his worst enemies of any kind, political or personal, can ever raise a finger as far as Manmohan Singh's integrity is concerned. I would be absurd. I remember a very pathos-filled moment when, after he had demitted office, his name appeared in the list of accused of the so-called coal scam. And I told him it's not worth, the allegation of the case is worth nothing. It doesn't hold water at all. But being one of the most honorable human beings in politics I've ever met, he was flabbergasted. He said, I've never even dreamt of anything wrong. How can my name appear there? So I explained to him how our system is such, the vagaries of our legal system, that just because you were holding the coal portfolio as Prime Minister for a while, during the relevant period, your name appears. And today, though that exoneration comes with death in criminal law, he was such an honorable man that he would not stop at anything short of a full exoneration if he was alive. Here was a man who could not do anything wrong consciously or even subconsciously in terms of illegality, in terms of deliberate, conniving and conspiracy. This is just not his nature. And he kept every possible magnet or counter-magnet of his family or larger family or relatives or friends away from the slightest exploitation or leveraging of his position. That's not a mean achievement in such a long record of politics. And remember, it's preceded by long years of top government service.
All right, so thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts. Shiv Sena MP Milind Deora is joining us now. Milind, you worked with Dr. Manmohan Singh as Minister of State for shipping between 2012 and 2014. So certainly you knew how was it to work with the former Prime Minister. Your best memories of Dr. Manmohan Singh?
Well, thank you for having me on your show, Maria. I've had the great privilege of knowing Dr. Manmohan Singh since I was a young boy. And he had a very close relationship with my late father. In fact, when he became RBI governor and used to live in Mumbai, I would see him coming home very often till December 2003. Barely 5 months before he passed away, he would prefer to stay at our home than to stay at the CCI club where my father would usually put him up. Many instances, in fact, a very close friend of mine who now lives in the Netherlands, he and I were just talking about the fact that how often he would meet Dr. Manmohan Singh at our home. And so throughout my personal life, my student life, my political life, right until the point that Dr. Manmohan Singh passed away, I've had the great fortune of being guided by him. There are many stories that come to mind from the time that I was a student figuring out what I should study, from the time when I was wanting to get into politics, from the time when I became an MP the first time, from the time when I was a minister in his government, to the time a few years ago when we were talking about the future of the Congress party, that come to mind. But there's maybe, in a longer discussion, I can talk about the anecdotes. Right now, all I would say is that he always struck me as someone who was humble, was accessible, and accessible not just with his time, but with his mind space. He was willing to engage with people who knew far less than him, people who would go to him to seek his advice. He would often turn the tables around and say, what is your view on something? And there are so many instances of that where there was a political problem, there was an economic issue, and he would say, tell me what young people are thinking. What do you think? How do you think we should resolve this issue? Here are the options I have before me. Do you think this will be palatable to young people? Do you think this is better? This has short-term gains, but long-term pain. This has short-term pain, long-term gains. And he was a pleasure to meet. I mean, I honestly enjoyed meeting him. Every interaction with him, every conversation with him was stimulating. You left feeling you learned something, even though often you were the one parting with information or with advice. And I think those are tenets of great leaders. Those are people who make you feel that way. I met Prime Minister Modi ji just a few days ago with my wife, and she said the same thing. She's saying, Milind, while he was talking, I felt like taking notes. And that's sometimes the way people are, in the way that they make younger people feel comfortable, the way they draw people in. So I can think of many instances, Maria, but one or two thoughts that come to mind. I remember when I had the opportunity to initiate the debate in Parliament on the historic right to information bill.
Yes.
And I was a first-time MP. Very rarely do first-time MPs at the age of 27 be given an opportunity to initiate a debate on what was then a flagship legislation of the UPA government. And he called me soon after my speech. He was present in the Lok Sabha when I was speaking. And I had the chance to speak for 25 minutes. He called me that evening and congratulated me. He congratulated me on three things that he had picked up about my speech, which he said no one else spoke about. When I spoke on the Indo-US nuclear agreement, which he obviously championed in 2005 during his visit to the White House when George W. Bush was president of the US. He called me soon after that. And, I remember conversations with him when I was shipping minister about attracting investments in the port sector, long conversations. I remember a conversation with him about the national e-governance plan. And I remember a conversation with him about getting him to join Twitter. And I was a late entrant to join Twitter at the time. And, I joined Twitter and I was never enthused by the idea of joining Twitter. But then I saw it has certain advantages and disadvantages. And then one day I was telling him that, I think you should be on Twitter. And the Prime Minister, you personally and the Prime Minister of India should have an account on Twitter. And eventually we got an account called PMO India to be formed and activated. We couldn't get him to be on Twitter. But he very openly in the conversation, he was asking me about social media, asking me about Twitter. And finally, after listening to me, he said, look, I don't know much about social media. I admit it's a blind spot for me, but you seem to be very enthusiastic about it. You seem to have thought it through. It seems to make sense. Why don't you meet my media advisor? Why don't you meet my media team? And I'm happy to get online if you think it's a good idea. And then sooner or later, his office was also thinking about it, and then it happened.
Okay.
So he was not someone who had insecurities. He was not someone who was discriminating on age or a lack of experience.
Yes, you said something very interesting. Just about every politician that I've spoken to today has spoken about his humility and also accessibility. I think as a politician yourself, you have picked up those qualities from your guide in Dr. Manmohan Singh. But was there some life lessons that he gave you, particularly at a time when a politician who has spent all his life in Congress party, comes from a generation, your father was a Congress leader, decided to move on and choose another party. Did you have any conversation with Dr. Manmohan Singh at that crucial juncture in your political career?
Look, these are things which I wouldn't want to share in public, but I've had many conversations with him about the Congress's past, the Congress's present, the Congress's future. And I would say I had a very good understanding of what he thought about where the Congress was headed. And again, that's for another conversation. I don't want to sort of talk about his legacy. And I think he went beyond the party that he represented. He really was someone who was respected across party lines. That's something the current Prime Minister also said. And, all I would say is that for me, when I was growing up, the Congress party, at least the economic vision of the Congress party was Manmohanomics. To me, that was the economic vision I understood was the Congress's economic vision going forward. That was what my father taught me. That's what Dr. Manmohan Singh taught me. That's what I saw in interactions, conversations between them. And I think that the Congress party has moved further away from that vision. Now, why have they done that is for them to answer. But I personally believe that the vision that he had was really an extension of Narasimha Rao's economic vision. It was carried forward by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. It was carried forward by Dr. Manmohan Singh. It's being carried forward by Prime Minister Narendra Modi today. And I think that is a vision which is representative of an aspirational India that wants India to succeed, that believes in, is confident about India's ability of India's private sector to take on global companies, to compete internationally. That's the vision I believe in, that there's no reason why we should not compete internationally. And I don't know if Dr. Manmohan Singh, in fact, I'm quite confident that Dr. Manmohan Singh would not be comfortable with the current economic vision of many parties in the opposition, not just the Congress party. Why have they strayed from that vision? That's for the Congress party to answer. But I think he was a true economic reformer. He believed in economic reforms, not just to please or to help and empower businesses in Mumbai or Delhi, but to genuinely empower the common Indian and to strengthen India and to make India more competitive globally. And that was the economic reforms and the economic vision that he had. He believed in disinvestment. He believed in privatization of loss-making PSUs. He believed in a smaller, more efficient government, in a government that used technology to enable efficient delivery of services. That's the same vision that today you see in Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So I don't see many differences in economic visions cutting across party lines and cutting across political leaders from Narasimha Rao to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And I think that is a vision that India needs, regardless of party. That's the vision that will keep India competitive globally. That's the vision that will allow India to strengthen itself and prevent any country that wants India to falter to achieve their objective. And so in that sense, I think Dr. Manmohan Singh had India's best interests in mind and close to his heart.
All right, Milind Deora, I appreciate your time. Of course, these are tough times for you personally because you saw him while you were growing up. So certainly he had that huge presence in your life. So thank you so much for speaking to NDTV and sharing your thoughts. Dr. Manmohan Singh will be remembered for his economic reforms, and someone who worked very closely with Dr. Manmohan Singh was Montek Singh Ahluwalia as the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission. He joins me live. Sir, thank you so much. You were responsible for actioning the vision of an economist prime minister. How was it like working with Dr. Manmohan Singh, and what was the clarity of thought that he gave you when you were working with him?
Well, I had known Dr. Manmohan Singh well before he became Prime Minister. As a matter of fact, he brought me into the Finance Ministry and then later on made me part of his team when he was Finance Minister. So I'd been working with him for quite a long time. And, he was a person of great clarity of vision. And anyone working for him knew exactly what his thinking was. He also encouraged you to give your own views. I mean, he didn't simply sort of say, well, this is my vision, and now you, as you say, implement it or action it. He said, look, this is my vision, and if you have a different view, you're free to express it. So it was a very exhilarating time when we were considering all kinds of new and different things, and you had the sense that different options were being weighed, which was pretty exciting for the period, actually.
And Mantak Singh Ahluwalia, when you look at the legacy of the former Prime Minister, do you believe his policies had huge impact on India's economic growth as it is being talked about right now?
Well, I have no doubt about that whatsoever. As a matter of fact, when he first introduced these policies as finance minister, they represent a dramatic change from the policies that the government had been following for several years. And they were controversial. Even amongst academics, the tendency was to stick to the old rather than to be welcoming the new. But I think over time, there were people who believed that we needed to change. I think we had a fairly good system internally of trying to broaden the consensus. One way or the other, people came around to the view that we do need to change. And if you take the longer view, there's no doubt that if India today is viewed as a sort of a country that could well become the next superpower, if you like. We're not there yet, but could well become. The very fact that we are positioned at a level where this opportunity is now opening up is because of the changes that were brought about after 1991. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that if we had not changed in 1991, we would be nowhere in the position we are in today. Second, the changes were not just done arbitrarily at one point. I mean, they were brought in by the Narasimha Manmohan Singh government with a lot of persuasion, a lot of effort to sort of bring people on board, make them understand, explain to them why their fears are not justified, etc. And the point is they were carried on by the next government. I mean, the Narasimha Rao Manmohan Singh government was succeeded by the United Front government, which had two different prime ministers. I mean, Deve Gowda to begin with, and then in the Gujarat. And that government actually had the Communist Party of India as a constituent of the coalition. Nevertheless, it continued the liberalization policies of the previous government. They were then followed by the BJP under Atal Bihari Vajpayee. That government also continued. When I say continued, I don't just mean they mechanically continued. They built on it and took further steps. So in a way, it looked as if different political sides of India seem to have come around to the notion that India can move forward and we should work together to get it to move forward. And at any given time between a government and an opposition, there will always be a lot of conflict. I mean, that's the job of an opposition. But I think what people felt had been established over this period is that while India is a very noisy democracy, where you get a lot of criticism, when governments change, there's still a fair amount of continuity, so that succeeding governments built on what had been achieved by previous governments. And I think that is really the sign of a healthy economic debate or a process of building an economic consensus on economic policy. I think it's quite clear that has been a success. And I mean, the economy during the UPA period when Dr. Singh was the Prime Minister, I mean, they had their problems, but overall, the growth rate of the economy was the highest ever. And what is more, it wasn't just a focus on GDP. Dr. Manmohan Singh was very, very concerned that, the benefits of growth must go down to the poorest. So the whole concern with poverty reduction was a very central thing. And that during that period, you not only had fast growth, but you had very rapid reduction in poverty. And that has continued. So I think India is currently in a good position. We have lots of problems and we have to tackle them. So I don't think we should assume that everything is done. But we have a track record of having been able to tackle complex problems, and that should give people some confidence that we know what to do.
So when do you think the foundation for this right trajectory was laid?
Sorry?
And what role did Dr. Manmohan Singh play in that? The foundation, because you talk about how he was a consensus
absolutely.
builder.
I mean, look,
and you've emphasized on the fact that there has been continuity in the thoughts of multiple governments.
I think he played a very major role. First of all, as finance minister, he never counted simply on the fact that we would win a vote in parliament. I mean, he was very concerned to persuade people on the opposition side the logic of what he was doing. In fact, I recall that, when he was finance minister, at one point he had been discussing with Mr. Vajpayee that we need to move forward in a particular direction. And Mr. Vajpayee was, in private, was in agreement with this. But later on, some other members of the BJP were critical of Dr. Manmohan Singh. And Dr. Manmohan Singh mentioned this to Mr. Vajpayee, that, how come after we discuss this, some other members of your party take a different view? And Mr. Vajpayee told him that, if you want to be in politics, you must learn to have a thick skin. So it's an interesting example that, you can get some agreement, but in a different form, that agreement may not always last. So I think one of his lasting legacies is that you need to think a lot about how to balance the pros and cons of a policy, take on board the different points of view, strike a balance, and build a consensus. And I think if we continue to do that, and different governments in their own way have tried to do that, I think we will be in economically good position for the next 10 or 20 years.
All right, sir, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and joining us on NDTV. It's an end of an era, an end of a political journey that will be remembered by one and all. Here's an obituary by NDTV on the life and times of Dr. Manmohan Singh.
I honestly believe that history will be kinder to me than the contemporary media or for that matter, the opposition parties in parliament.
Famous words from Dr. Manmohan Singh at the last major press interaction in 2014 before the general elections. The man who served as Prime Minister for 10 years had a huge impact on modern India. A lifetime congressman, but a late entrant into politics as we know it today. Dr. Manmohan Singh was a 6-term Rajya Sabha MP. He could never become a member of the lower house. He contested only one Lok Sabha election from the South Delhi constituency in 1999 and was defeated by BJP's Vijay Kumar Malhotra. In 2004, the Congress emerged as the single largest party in a shocked general election that saw the unexpected defeat of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. There was a clamour for Sonia Gandhi to take over as Prime Minister of a Congress-led coalition, but Mrs. Gandhi struggled with the decision for days. A week later, she surprised everyone when she announced that Dr. Manmohan Singh would be her choice for Prime Minister.
I'm very happy. I think our country will be safe in Dr. Manmohan Singh's hands.
Dr. Manmohan Singh went on to become the Prime Minister from being the leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha from March 21, 1998 to May 21, 2004. From Vajpayee's NDA coalition government to the birth of the UPA, with coalition partners for the Congress as disparate as the DMK from Tamil Nadu to the CPI and the CPN, with whom the Prime Minister would share a rocky relationship. That coalition was first tested after the India-US nuclear deal of 2005. It was a landmark agreement made by Dr. Singh and then US President George W. Bush. India, which has faced international pressure to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT, after its nuclear tests in 1974 and 1998, was now on its way towards joining the global nuclear club.
Civilian nuclear energy has a greater role in meeting global energy demands.
His first term was also marked with the passage of key laws, like the Right to Information, Rural Health Mission, and Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. But there was also whispers about who was really in charge. Sonia Gandhi had taken over head of the NAC, a body called the National Advisory Council, and critics said she was the one actually calling the shots. In 2009, the UPA came back with a bigger mandate, with Dr. Manmohan Singh advertised as the Congress's face for Prime Minister. India had given Dr. Singh a big thumbs up, but the second term was nothing like the first. Allegations surfaced of large-scale corruption in the Commonwealth Games, on coal block allocations, and most famously, the 2G scam, which a court years later has upheld never happened. The appeals are pending. The opposition accused Dr. Singh of not speaking up, of being a mute spectator to rampant corruption. Dr. Singh may not have been the most eloquent Prime Minister, but he had his moments, like this Parliament debate with Sushma Swaraj in 2013, where both invoked poetry to make the point. One of the most memorable exchanges on the floor of the House.
हमको है उनसे वफा की उम्मीद जो जानते नहीं वफा क्या है.
कुछ तो मजबूरियां रही होंगी, यूं ही कोई बेवफा नहीं होता.
Dr. Manmohan Singh is also remembered as one of the most candid and open prime ministers India has seen, with innumerable press interactions. He never failed to admit a mistake, both at press conferences and in Parliament.
I have no hesitation in apologizing not only to the Sikh community but to the whole Indian nationhood, because what took place in 1984 is the negation of the concept of nationhood enshrined in our constitution.
Dr. Manmohan Singh's style was distinctive and extremely open book, not only within his Prime Minister's office and to his cabinet colleagues and officials, also to the media. He held innumerable press conferences open to take sometimes even the most difficult of questions.
An economist, scholar, patriot turned politician, Dr. Manmohan Singh was always bipartisan to the core when it came to national interest and economic growth. His first administration put GST on the agenda, an idea first conceived by his predecessor, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and finally implemented by the Modi government. After Narendra Modi's big win in 2014, Dr. Manmohan Singh played the role of the opposition's conscience keeper, cautioning the government on the economy, demonetization and other crucial issues.
Scheme of monetization, the way it has been implemented, will hurt agricultural growth in our country, will hurt small industry, will hurt all those people who are in the informal sectors of the economy.
As his health deteriorated, Dr. Singh was rarely seen in public. His last political appearance was during a no-trust vote in Rajya Sabha in 2023, when he was brought in on a wheelchair. He retired from Rajya Sabha in April of 2024.
इतने लंबे अरसे तक जिस प्रकार से उन्होंने इस सदन का मार्गदर्शन किया है, देश का मार्गदर्शन किया है, वो हमेशा हमेशा जब भी हमारे लोकतंत्र की चर्चा होगी तो कुछ माननीय सदस्यों की जो चर्चा होगी उसमें माननीय डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह की योगदान की चर्चा जरूर होगी।
Manmohan Singh was never a typical politician for a man who was often called an accidental prime minister. Dr. Singh was at the helm for 10 long years, a tenure that left a lasting impact.